Devontae Smith to get a reception. Boom.
How is
Bang
Devontae
that.
Smith the slim reaper? Isn't that Kevin Durant? Hasn't that already been claimed?
It's also Devontae Smith.
Thank
You got to
very
have
much.
a football one and a basketball one.
Right. But you know what? There should be a Slim Reaper for everything. There should be a Slim Reaper for hockey.
Yeah.
Who's a hockey?
Yeah, Victor Hedman becomes the Slim Reaper. Sure.
In the WNBA, you like the WNBA.
Yeah.
Who's the Slim Reaper in the WNBA?
Great hockey
Stewart.
call.
Brianna Stewart.
Brianna Stewart. There you go.
Wow.
Who's the Slim Reaper on this show?
Scott Rogers.
Yeah, there you go.
There we
I like
go.
that. I like that.
Everybody's
That
got a
was the
Slim
right
Reaper.
call, by the way. Definitely not me.
Fantasy Football Happy Hour with Matthew Berry, served by Applebee's.
Welcome to the Fantasy Football Happy Hour. It's Love Hate Day. I'm your host, the Slim Reaper, alongside Matthew Berry and Jay Croucher.
You know what? Some people have called me the Grim Reaper, because I look close to death as it is. So,
We need to get some thick reaper. Maybe Jalen Carter can be the thick reaper
the
alongside
Reaper is
Devontae
not bad.
Smith.
Or
Different
Jordan
size.
Davis.
Yeah, different size, I got the dad Reaper, is what I'm feeling. The
Dad
tire
Reaper.
Reaper. I don't
Okay.
know.
Like your clothes today, Matthew.
Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Interesting
I went,
with the tuck in. Kind of like a Peaky Blinders
Well, here's the
arrangement.
thing. All right, yeah. So he's giving me crap about the fact that my shirt is tucked in. Here's what happens. All right, F you, because I'm gonna go there. You know what? You're trying to embarrass me, but here's what happens. Here's what happens. Look at this. See, this is
no.
so I've got like a mic. I got a pack here.
Yeah, you got tramp
and it's
stamp?
right. No. Can you guys see? Oh, you guys can't see this. Hang on. Screw this.
There we
Screw
go.
you guys. Hang on, I'm going to show you guys. All right, so look, you see this pack right here? That's like my microphone pack and everything like that. And what happens is if I don't have the shirt tucked in, it digs into my skin is what it is. And it's cold and it's metal and it hurts. And so then I'm leaning back and I'm like, oh. And so anyway, I could decide to either tuck my shirt or play through pain. And you know what? Some of us aren't strong enough to do that. So I guess that's right. I tuck my shirt in so that I can focus entirely on giving the best fantasy analysis and making fun of you. Like, that's my entire goal here, not necessarily looking great. I appreciate that you wore like a Nicolo Jokic, as a kid and wore toward Yugoslavia sweatshirt. Era
Piccolo?
sweatshirt.
Dragon Ball Z.
I get
Oh,
you.
man, we're off to a hell of a start.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about TJ Watt
seriously,
TJ Watt's
that-
playing through a dislocated finger and torn ligaments. Matthew Berry can't take a mic back and pressed up against his back because it's cold.
Well, it's cold and it digs in. It digs into my skin. And then my wife is like, "What happened to your
poor
back?" I'm
TJ.
like, "It's the mic pack." In all seriousness, that's like a discount rack. Like, that's not even like a real. Connor, feel that logo. Like, that's like
it's
a
real.
pasted on logo.
No,
Like,
it's real.
It's better than I
no,
thought.
stop it. That's
No,
like
it does.
what do you
So
call it
good.
when you press it on? Like when you're at the
Heat press?
mall. Yeah, exactly. Like that's
authentic.
That's a $10.
Jokic gave me
like
this.
you went to dollar store and got
Nicolo.
that. That probably doesn't-
Nicolo.
Yeah.
That's my friend Nicolo.
Nicolo.
My best Serbian friend in the world.
Oh, man.
Oh, boy.
Wow, a lot of hate to start Love Hate today. I'll say that. We're really in the spirit.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get to some love. because
Really,
there's
really
a lot
in
of
the
hate
spirit.
already here.
Well, let's jump into the Rotoworld player news first. And of course, for all your Rotoworld player news, go to NBCSports.com. And here are the notable injuries we are tracking early in the week right now. Ride or die Amon-Ra St. Brown still dealing with the abdomen. He was limited in practice. Same for Saquon Barkley and T. Higgins, limited in practice. A lot of DNPs, though, early in the week here, guys. Deshaun Watson, Darren Waller, Zay Jones, Jahmyr Gibbs, Tank Dell, Mike Evans, and Roshan Johnson have all not practiced to start the week.
And there's a couple that kind of really make me nervous here, especially Watson and Evans, because, by the way, Evans, Pro Football Talk, just literally minutes before we went on air when I was tucking in my shirt, tweeted out the fact that Evans not spotted at the open portion of practice, the beginning of practice. So again, Watson coming off the bye, Mike Evans coming off the bye. They had a whole week off to get healthy, and they're still not practicing this week. I don't know about Cleveland today yet, but as of Thursday, Evans not spotted at the early portion of practice. That's concerning as well. Also, Tank Dell, it's trending in the wrong direction for my guy, Tank Dell, as well. Higgins, at least, it's nice to see Higgins and Amon-Ra back at practice, even in a limited fashion.
Yep, an expectation seems to be that Saquon Barkley should play. Not sure about the rest of his team because Daniel Jones didn't practice. Andrew Thomas didn't either. Some big, important players for the Giants. And the line in Niners-Browns is now up to 7 with a total of 37.5. So certainly the market and DraftKings expects that Deshaun Watson will not play.
Yeah. All right, let's look at Thursday night's injuries then as we get ready for the game. Travis Kelce questionable with the ankle. It seems like he's playing, though.
He's playing.
Yeah.
Reports are Taylor Swift will be in the house tonight.
She skipped last week. Not a big fan of Minnesota.
Who is?
Whoa. From downtown. What?
Come on.
Minnesota's
is a great
lovely.
city.
Honestly,
Very warm.
Very warm. You know what? They did as good. I went to see a Super Bowl there, and it was cold as all get out.
Hell,
But
it's
they did
cold
as
as
good
my
a job. They did as good a job as possible as they could, given how cold it was. It is the hometown of Prince. I'm a big fan of Prince.
Greg Dulcich, he's questionable with the hamstring
I'm just saying,
injury.
if Taylor Swift is supposed to be there tonight, and so Travis Kelce is playing.
I feel like Taylor Swift has earned the right to pick and choose her spots on the schedule.
Well,
Clearly,
it was
yeah.
the world premiere of her Eras Tour movie last night, and so she was in Los Angeles for that. She's quite the jet setter. From Los Angeles now back to Kansas City, so she'll be in the house tonight. What would you set the line at numbers of times we see her on camera, the shots to her? What would you set the line at?
11.5.
I'm taking the over.
Under. Yeah, you're
I'm taking the over.
Okay, no, that's reasonable.
Where would you?
I'd
that
go
might be my
over.
bet. Can we get DraftKings to put a line on that?
I think we can.
Yeah,
I was going to
let's
ask,
talk
what are the odds
Mr.
she makes the 8-hour flight across to Europe when the Chiefs play the Dolphins in a few weeks? Because that's the real test of the relationship. Is, are you flying?
I like that you put that out there.
Across the Atlantic Ocean, Taylor.
What would you say the odds are that she makes the trip?
Yeah, I'm not. I'd say
Plus
make
300?
slight dog. Yeah, slight dog.
Slight dog. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is really nice over there. I mean, the thing is that she gets to. I mean, she travels private. And
It's true. It's not
she's
like
not,
us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's not
Name
like.
Connor.
She's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
like.
Thank
She's
you.
not
Yeah,
like.
clarify
I hope
that.
I get upgraded. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like. Like.
Yeah.
She's sitting in a middle seat.
Yeah.
And didn't even have pre-check.
No,
That's not
exactly.
Taylor
Like,
Swift's life.
She's probably got her own 750 private 757.
Yeah,
like,
branded
branded
with all her album covers on it.
Yeah,
I would think
exactly.
so.
Yeah, I wonder. Do you think? I don't think she pulls the Dan Snyder thing where she puts her logo on the plane and then charges her company back for it, because that's what Snyder did. You know, he put the Washington logo on the plane and then charged the team $4 million for advertising on his own private plane.
Miss Dan
I don't
content.
think
Sorry,
anyone else does.
a lot of people didn't see me going from Taylor Swift, who I'm a fan of, to Dan Snyder, who I hate.
You
but
bring
you know
it all
what?
back to the Commanders.
I
Smooth
made that
transition.
switch.
By the way,
1980.
Javonte Williams is going to play tonight, in
Yes,
case you missed
sir.
that one on the graphic as well. Now, honestly, how much Javonte Williams plays in an already crowded backfield when he's working his way back from a quad injury, we'll see.
This is interesting, right? Because, again, there's no injury designation on Javonte Williams for tonight's game. Having said that, I think his line is 35.5 rushing yards. They're not expecting a big workload for him because, again, they do like Samaje Perine on third down, and Jaleel McLaughlin's been a thing. Not to mention by the fact that, as a double-digit underdog, the expectation here is that Denver's going to have to throw quite a bit to keep up with the Chiefs.
Yep. When there's situations like that, I like backing the alternate overs on players like Javonte. Because what if he's just fine? He's got no injury designation.
Yeah,
They
sure.
might have just given him some extra time. Maybe he's just Javonte Williams. Because the market's just guessing with things like this. So he's plus 550 to get 70-plus rushing yards. Chiefs defense doesn't really scare you. It's fine. Doesn't scare you. Game script will hurt. But you expect that he will be the number one running
Although
back.
the Broncos, I feel like
good offense.
Yeah,
It's fine.
exactly. The defense is awful. By the way, it is. I don't know how much this will impact it, but there is expected to be kind of a windy game tonight. The weather's not supposed to be great. So again, maybe that affects some of the passing, and maybe they do try to grind it out a little bit more on the ground.
Well, let's jump into more running backs as we get into love-hate, and that's where we start. And, of course, we're looking at the Miami offense, as we often do, and that is Raheem Mostert, Matthew. He tops the love list for running backs. He comes in as RB6 for you in a matchup against the Panthers that the Dolphins are favored by 2 touchdowns.
He's had at least 15 fantasy points in each of his last 3 games when he's had 12 touches. Panthers allow the second most fantasy points to running backs this season. They've allowed the most rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs. No team in the NFL has allowed more. They're tied for the most. And, oh, by the way, no Devon Achane. So Jeff Wilson Jr., by the way, not mentioned. We didn't see that on the screen, but Jeff Wilson Jr. practiced yesterday, which is exciting. Dolphins running back coach says he looks good to go. He has not officially been activated yet, but it's trending in the right direction for Wilson to be out there. But still, even if he's out there, it's his first game back. Mostert should be the lead back in an amazing matchup. He's my running back 6 this week. And it wouldn't shock me if he finishes as the number 1 running back in fantasy this week.
Yep.
He has that kind of upside.
13.5-point favorites for the best offense in football. So most that just by accident might score 2 touchdowns.
And it just goes to show to all NFL players out there, Raheem Mostert on the show last year, and now look at how well he's doing. So you come on the show, you have a great year.
Yep. No. Ipso facto, as you say.
Ipso facto. Jonathan Taylor was on the show. He got paid.
Yes.
Just
CD Lamb was on the show, had a great game against the Niners, and so forth.
George Kittle was on the show. George Kittle had 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
I'm just, it just goes to show you.
There's no denying this.
It's Deebo Samuel was on the show, and then he was a decoy the next game. But overall, he's usually pretty good.
Yeah. Big great game against the Giants.
Yes.
Yep.
There you go.
Our next one here, Jay, Isiah Pacheco against the Broncos. We saw what Breece Hall did to this Broncos defense. We've seen what a lot of offensive players have done to this Broncos defense. He checks in as a top 10 running back for Matthew this week.
Yep, and his rushing prop on DraftKings is 74.5, minus 135 the over. I don't think it's ever been that high.
I was gonna say
for
it's
Isiah
high.
Pacheco. That's as high as it's ever gotten. And look, against this Broncos rushing defense, which is, activated, 4 touchdown games for Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane combined, activated Breece Hall back into a top 5 running back in the NFL on talent. I think that this is as good a situation as Isiah Pacheco will ever have.
No team in the NFL allows more rushing yards per game than the Denver Broncos, right? 164 rushing yards per game, 6.1 yards per carry to opposing running backs. Obviously, some of that's inflated by how insane the Miami game was and Achane and Mostert, but still, in 4 out of the 5 games they played this year, the Broncos have allowed at least 22 fantasy points to a running back. Pacheco is clearly the lead back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Again, we talked about maybe isn't great weather there, so maybe the passing isn't working as much. They want to feed Pacheco even more. Game script should work. It is a short week as well, so yeah, man, give me some Isiah Pacheco. He's a top 10 running back play this week. He's my running back 9.
Connor, you watched the Broncos pretty closely, allegedly, as they played the Jets. What's wrong with this defense? Because this was an elite defense last year. Do you think this is just going to be the situation going forward this year?
There's no gap control in their run defense. It's a lot of guys guessing. It's a lot of players that are just simply not good run defenders anyway. I mean, you watch the Breece Hall 72-yard touchdown run. The Jets had a lead back blocking fullback on the play. He didn't have to block anyone. They ran out of players that would have made the tackle on Breece, and Breece scored anyway. The Jets had an extra blocker that they didn't even need on the play. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing. That's how bad they are. That's how bad they are. So, yes, this isn't like a weird
I'm just going to
blip.
watch and enjoy the play.
Yeah, literally nothing to do. So that's how bad the Broncos defense are, and this is not a trend. This is a season-long thing that will continue.
Yep. And they've also, again, the Broncos traveling on a short week to Kansas City, so that, it's an offense they know well, but still, it doesn't feel like
what could go wrong?
What could go wrong? It's they don't look super prepared.
All right, so expect big things from Isiah Pacheco, who had a good day against the Jets defense a couple weeks ago, and that's who DeAndre Swift has this week, guys. He comes in, Barry, as RB12 for you, and Swift has taken this job and simply ran away with it.
I see what you did there.
You like that one?
I do. Listen, this is a pro Swift show, whether it's Taylor or DeAndre, as he's leaping over tacklers there with his tucked-in shirt, Jay Croucher, because real men. Oh, actually, it got untucked.
He's mic'd up for NFL Films.
He's mic'd up for NFL Films.
Cold
That's what
wire.
it is. Exactly. He didn't mind the cold wire. He's tougher than me. He's also better than me, right? 4 straight games with at least 17 touches. He's also had basically a 15% target share over the past 2 weeks, which has been really nice. That was always one of the anti-arguments against him in the preseason was, well, the Eagles just don't really throw to their running backs. But the last 2 weeks, they have been as well. I know people might be scared about the matchup with the Jets, but believe it or not, New York actually bottom 10 in terms of most fantasy points allowed to running backs this season. You can run on the Jets, especially when you're obviously behind one of the best offensive lines in football. So, yeah, give me DeAndre Swift as a top 12 running back this week. I think people might be scared off the matchup, and they shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I think the key is, as you mentioned, the work in the passing game. When he was going off against Minnesota and Tampa Bay, those 175, 130 rushing games back-to-back, he only had 14 receiving yards across those 2 games. He's had 10 receptions the past 2 games. He's clearly separated himself from Kenneth Gainwell.
Correct.
And now, they're touchdown favorites, so you'd expect that they would be able to run the ball.
Yeah.
A couple others receiving votes. James Cook, who we talked a lot about earlier in the week. Jaleel McLaughlin, or as some people would say, a rich man's Jahmyr Gibbs. And Emari Demercado, who was a big hit on the waiver wire this week, guys.
Giants have allowed the second most rushing yards to running backs this season. James Cook is a top 20 play for me. Again, we talked about him on yesterday's show. Jaleel McLaughlin, tonight, look, he's had 133 scrimmage yards on 22 touches over the last 2 weeks. We just talked about it with Javonte Williams, that maybe they limit him a little bit in his first game back. Remember, he's had a double-digit target share in each of the last 2 games with the Broncos as a 10.5-point underdog. They're probably throwing more than they want to. McLaughlin is the guy they like in the passing game. And Amari Demercado, again, we're trying to figure out this Arizona backfield. I think you'll see some Keontae Ingram. Maybe you'll see a touch or two for Rondell Moore. But it feels like when they're on third down, it will be Demercado, who played 100% of the snaps when James Conner went down. And he's played Keontae Ingram's had 0 third down snaps this entire season. Now, Ingram was a scratch last week, so that's why one of the reasons why Demercado got so much run after James Conner went down. But Cardinals are a touchdown underdog here. So the theory here is they're going to be throwing more, and so Demercado, who's the passing down back, I think he's flex play usable in a PPR league. He's my running back 32. Let's not get crazy, but it feels like he's the safer bet if you're playing a Cardinals running back, if you have to, because you've got Aaron Jones and Najee Harris on a bye, whatever.
My man, Najee Harris.
You're not,
yeah,
man.
We spoke about him yesterday, but James Cook is the one for me. I know a lot of people would have hopped off the bandwagon a little bit after he did, effectively nothing against the Jags, but
Yes.
They were trailing that entire game. They were just never in position to really run the ball, constantly throwing, just couldn't stay on the field, couldn't convert a third down. James Cook will be fine, averaging almost 5 yards per carry, and gets a dream matchup against the Giants.
Jay, if you had to start one between Jaleel McLaughlin and Emari Demercado, Barry has them RB31 and RB32. In your flex, who do you roll with? Do you roll with the early play for Thursday Night Football, or do you wait it out?
I think I would go Demercado. Also because you get a little bit of flexibility as well to understand the situation, just the extra few days. Because when it's that close, I kind of prize that flexibility. Also, Jaleel McLaughlin. The thing is that he probably will get passing game work because they're probably going to be down. But I just have a bit more confidence in the stability of Demercado's role, which is a strange thing to say, but I think it's true.
All right, a couple running backs that make the hate list. We're going to start with Jonathan Taylor as he tries to get back into form, coming off the IR with the extension. He's got the Jacksonville defense this week. And Barry, he comes in as RB25 for you as the Colts try to get him back into form while Zach Moss is still a thing.
Yeah, it feels like he's more of a touchdown-dependent flex this week until we see the full workload for him, and we just don't know when that's going to be. Maybe it's this week, maybe it's 2 weeks from now. I mean, the guy played 10 snaps last week. He played 10 snaps last week, and Zach Moss was awesome. So really all you're doing is you're banking on reputation. Obviously, the guy did get paid, but it's not a great matchup. Jags allow the 5th fewest rushing yards per game to running backs so far this year. Only one running back has scored 15 or more fantasy points against Jacksonville this entire year. I mean, they just shut down James Cook last week, right? And so the Jaguars, who have gone through this before, coming back from London, right? So they know sort of how to deal with that as well. So if you're telling me they've only allowed one running back all year to get at least 15 fantasy points. And if you say to me, well, listen, it's going to happen a second time. There's going to be one Colts running back that gets 15 fantasy points against them. You feel better about Zach Moss than you do at Jonathan Taylor this week. So again, maybe he ramps up from 10 snaps to like 20 or something like that. But I think you're really going to need him to pay off into the end zone for him to be worth playing this week.
Yeah, I agree. This week isn't great for JT, but I would be looking to trade for Taylor if he has a bad game because one, it's going to flip the snap count and the carries, and then two, quietly, the Colts offensive line is playing really well. It was a disaster last year. It wasn't even great the year before when JT had that amazing year, but Quentin Nelson, Ryan Kelly, Braden Smith, these guys are all back to playing all-pro level, so it's going to turn, and JT, I think, will be a monster down the stretch.
And one other thing, this came out after we did the show yesterday, but I believe Adam Schefter tweeting out the fact that the expectation now is that it might be 4 to 8 weeks as Anthony Richardson deals with this AC sprain joint. And so one of the things we talked about when the injury came about is that in the 3 games that Gardner Minshew has played this year, the Colts are averaging 30 or more running back touches a game in those games. And so they still want to be run heavy, to your point. Like, the offensive line is a strength, and they want to be run heavy, that Shane Steichen wants to do that. But without Richardson to be one of the guys that's running the ball, that's more work for Taylor and Moss. They'll still be run heavy. And if Richardson's going to miss 2 months now, suddenly, or at least that's within the cards that he potentially could, you feel better about the workload of the running backs, less chances for them to get vultured at the goal line, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, very easy schedule for the Colts as well, which I think is pivotal there because they will be in game scripts where they can run.
Our next one, Jay, Miles Sanders. A lot of things going the wrong with direction for Miles Sanders. Snap rates going down, target shares going down, and quite frankly, this isn't an offense that can run the football either.
Who would you rather start, Matthew, this weekend? Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard?
Chuba Hubbard?
Yeah. Grim.
Well, because I don't know if Miles Sanders is 100% healthy. I mean, we saw the tweet the other day about Frank Reich saying like Miles Sanders in practice this week, had a little something, very vague. But he whatever, he's had the groin issue, he's been dealing with it. And as we talked about yesterday, Miles Sanders' passing game usage has completely disappeared the last 2 weeks, and Chuba Hubbard is getting there. Into a game in which we expect them to get absolutely destroyed by the Dolphins. I mean, the Panthers are, one of the worst teams. There's a reason Carolina picked first in the NFL draft last year. There's a reason they haven't won a game yet this year. And so the Dolphins, which is, as good a team as there is in the NFL right now, they should win this handily. And so whether it's because there be a negative game script and they trust Hubbard more in the passing game, or because Sanders isn't 100% healthy and in a game in which now they're down, they're like, you know what, Miles, just no reason to further injure yourself. Just go take a break. Yeah, I think I feel better. I don't feel good about any of them, but I think if forced to start one of them, I feel better about Hubbard.
Yep, agreed.
Our last one, Jerome Ford, and he's got the Niners defense. There's basically a trend this year, Barry. If somebody has the Niners defense, there's a good chance they show up on the hate list.
Yeah, I mean, look, San Francisco allows the fewest rushing yards per game to running backs this season. Teams that face 49ers are averaging a league low 11.8 running backs per carry. I mean, they're not being able to run the ball. The offense is so efficient on the other side of the ball. They find themselves a negative game script. I mean, they just shut down Tony Pollard. I like Jerome Ford, right? We all like Jerome Ford.
Oh, we love him.
He ain't Tony Pollard, and Tony Pollard could do nothing against this Niners defense as well. The 2 games that Ford has started, he's averaging just 2.3 yards per carry. What you're counting on with Ford is the passing game usage, but now it's either going to be a less than healthy Deshaun Watson or looking more and more likely it's P.J. Walker under center. And so maybe he gets you there with some passing game usage and some quick dump-offs because Walker will be under pressure. But I have him as barely a top 30 play this week. He's running back 27. Hard for me to see him as anything other than just kind of a PPR flex where you squint and hope.
Yeah, I can't imagine anyone's going to see more 8-man boxes than Jerome Ford and the Cleveland offense this week because, again, 20-mile-per-hour winds as well in Cleveland. I would expect that San Francisco are going to try and make P.J. Walker, if it is P.J. Walker, throw the ball. Not a great situation for Jerome Ford, who showed against the Ravens that he probably can't overcome, a difficult context in terms of game script and in terms of people loading up to stop the run.
The toughest competition of the year is
Hang on,
here.
before you get there, wait.
The toughest competition of the year is
here.
here.
Before you get to the toughest competition of the year, I just want to point this out. Stephen, take off the promo for a second. I have something I want to discuss. All right, thank you. All right. I'm just curious because Jay, I want to compliment you on one thing right here.
Don't fall for it.
No. And here's what it is: you take a stand. Yeah. I admire that. Yeah. I admire that. Listen, I just feel like Connor way too often fences it. Yeah. Right? I mean, you took a shot to my my tucked-in shirt there, and Connor just let it go. Connor should have either defended me or jumped in and piled on. But he just laid back and didn't do anything, which I feel like is too common a thing. So I'm putting you on the spot. Where are you? Do you disagree with my choice, or are you on board with this?
Oh, no, it's pathetic. Okay. The cold wire?
It's not the cold. It's not the cold wire. It's a metal. It's not the cold wire. It is literally a metal thing. It is a metal. I'm going to pull it out and I'll show you. It is this metal thing that just digs into your skin.
Yeah, me and Connor have got it too.
We're mic'd up.
Yeah, we also have microphones.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. Maybe the guys just don't like me on the crew and they just shove it down there. But all of a sudden, I get these. What it is. Maybe it is. I get these red marks at the top of my ass, and it's just because they're like, boo. Yeah. So anyway,
you get home, your wife's like, "What's going on?"
Right, exactly.
That's fair. All right, so now I get.
She's like, "You and Jay, did you guys recreate One Night in Buffalo?" And I'm like, "Honey, no, that was a one-time thing."
The rumors are true. The toughest competition of the year is here. The biggest talents in men's rugby take the stage as 20 countries compete for 20 days of heart-pounding, hard-hitting action at the Rugby World Cup. Watch every match live on Peacock all the way through the final on October 28th, with games also available on CNBC. We're taking our first break. When we're back, love-hate continues. Pass catchers, quarterbacks, coming right up. This Saturday, South Bend will set the stage for some of the biggest stars in college football that hope to shine in one of the sport's biggest rivalries as the USC Trojans take on the Fighting Irish under the lights at Notre Dame Stadium. Legacies will be written and bragging rights will be claimed. It's USC Notre Dame, Saturday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on NBC and Peacock.
What do you take away from playing with Cooper for the first time in a game?
The game comes really easy. It just flows kind of naturally, and being able to ask questions and kind of see what the coverage is and what we were kind of expecting before the game, what we talked about through the week happened right before our eyes. It never turns out there.
So people shouldn't drop you from their fantasy teams. What it comes down to, right?
I don't know.
That was Puka Nacua. He doesn't want to tell you that you should not drop him from your fantasy team because that would be insane. Puka Nacua leads the love list for pass catchers here, guys. We finally got to see him play with Cooper Kupp, and really not much changed for Puka Nacua. Still an effective target that can play alongside Cooper Kupp. So, Matthew, he comes in as wide receiver 10 for you this week against the Cardinals.
He's clearly a wide receiver 1. He played 100% of the snaps last week. He saw a 32% target share with Cooper Kupp on the field. And then you think about this matchup with Arizona, which is so great. They bottom 5 in the NFL in both receptions and most yards allowed to wide receivers. They allow the 3rd highest catch rate to opposing wide receivers. And by the way, just so for my love-hate today, which is available, you can read it for free on NBCSports.com, Rotoworld.com. I did an AMA, Ask Matthew Anything. And one of the questions that I didn't get to use, I got so many great questions that I had to cut it down, but one of the questions I got to use is, have you ever seen Puka Nacua and Danny Rojas in the same room? Of course, Danny Rojas, one of the great AFC Richmond players from Ted Lasso. And the answer is no, you haven't seen him.
No, that's a good call. He's a very happy man, Puka Nacua.
Yeah, always smiling.
Again, football is life.
Yeah, leading the league in targets and receptions, as everyone predicted. I think the big thing with Nacua is that he got 11 targets in a game with Cooper Kupp. And Cooper Kupp, there's no restrictions on Cooper Kupp. Right. He's just Cooper Kupp. And also, the big thing there is they only had the ball for 22 minutes because the Eagles kept on the, as you call it, the bush, the brotherly shove. They just could not get off the field. And so the fact that he was still able to produce as he did, that's almost his flaw these days, Puka Nacua.
100%. And by the way, Rams have the 4th highest implied team total when you look at the numbers on DraftKings. Real quickly, I just want to point out that as we talk about the fact this my Ask Matthew Anything, my love-hate column, I want to give a shout out here. So I didn't get to use the Danny Rojas question, but one question I did use was Wade Garrett. It was my favorite question. Wade Garrett gave me my favorite question. He drinks for free. I can't repeat the question on air. You'll have to go check out the column at NBCSports.com, Rotoworld.com. But Wade drinks for free today at the happy hour.
Our next one here, Jay, Adam Thielen, who has been the guy for Bryce Young and also Andy Dalton at one point of this season for the Carolina Panthers. He comes in as a top 15 wide receiver against the Dolphins in a game that they're underdogs by 2 touchdowns. A lot of throwing expected.
Yeah, and the thing is, with fantasy, the yards don't have to matter, Matthew. They don't have to contribute towards a victory. They just need to happen. And I think that it was good that Bryce Young showed last week that he can compile garbage time yards, which I think was a question mark. But the fact that he was able to move the ball against Detroit's prevent defense, I think it bodes well for people like Adam Thielen going forward. Adam Thielen, who just looks more spry than he has in previous years, and he's clearly the guy for Bryce Young.
Yeah, by the way, that's been described to me as well. I look more spry than I think I have in years as well. You mentioned the usage, right? He's had at least 1 red zone target in 3 of the last 4 games. 4 straight games with at least 7 receptions, averaging over 11 targets in that stretch. And so again, game script, right, as you suggest, thinks that they'll be throwing a ton. Well, get this. The Dolphins, as good as they are on offense, they're actually tied for the 2nd most receptions allowed to the slot this year, which is obviously where Thielen runs the majority of his routes. I'm as a top 12 wide receiver. I don't know how long it's going to last, but for this week, he's a wide receiver 1.
Another wide receiver that comes in the top 15, Calvin Ridley, who he's got the Colts again. We saw what he was able to do against the Colts in week 1, 8 catches over 100 yards and a touchdown, Barry. It looks like, and Trevor Lawrence played really, really well last week in London against the Bills. I think that helps out here as well.
It really does. Look, the first game against Indianapolis in week 1, 8 for 101 and a touchdown on 11 targets. Colts are bottom 10 in both fantasy points and yards allowed to wide receivers this season. We should see a decent amount of targets for Calvin Ridley. I really like Trevor Lawrence in this game as well. Hint about what might be coming up later. And so Ridley, who's seen 7 or more targets in 4 or 5 games this season, well, get this. Wide receivers that have seen at least 7 targets against Indianapolis this year are averaging almost 20 fantasy points per game. Give me Calvin Ridley as a top 15 wide receiver. He's my number 14 wide out in week 6.
I think the other thing with Ridley is that often you expect players like rookies to potentially get better as the season goes on, as they become more accustomed with the offense. You'd also expect the guy who hasn't really played in 3 years to get better as the season goes on, as he gets more of a rapport with Trevor Lawrence. Think back to that Kansas City game in particular, where they were just like slightly off with their timing, and Ridley could have had a touchdown. He could have had a lot more yards and catches in that game. So I would expect that he is a guy who should get better as the season progresses.
Yeah, and earlier on the injury report, we showed Zay Jones did not practice with the knee injury as well. So expect a lot of targets obviously, for Ridley in this game. How about Logan Thomas against the Falcons, coming in Barry's rankings, Jay, as tight end 12? We've seen a spry Logan Thomas recently as well.
Very spry. Matthew's man, Logan Thomas, who
Yeah, sure.
makes it into the show every single day somehow. I'm not really sure how, but I think you raised the point yesterday, Matthew, that Sam Howell is under pressure so much that he often just needs to get the ball out.
Yeah.
And who's he get it out to? The tallest person in front of him, who's in the middle of the field, in Logan Thomas. And clearly they have a rapport. Howell does not have a rapport with Darren McLaurin or Jahan Dotson for some reason, but Logan Thomas seems like his guy.
Yeah, he's had at least 40 receptions in 3 of the past 4 games. He's scored in 2 of those. It's a good match with the Falcons. 4 of the 5 tight ends to face Atlanta this year have scored at least 12 fantasy points. They allow the second most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. And you think about Eric Bieniemy's offense coming from Kansas City, obviously. I'm not saying Logan Thomas is Travis Kelce, but you do know that the tight end is part of that offensive scheme.
All right, a couple others receiving votes. Jakobi Meyers, who has been a target monster when healthy in that Raiders offense. Jordan Addison, of course. Justin Jefferson is down for at least a couple weeks now. Josh Downs, who's looked really good with Gardner Minshew when Minshew has played. Rashee Rice, who is starting to pick up some steam as a rookie in the Chiefs offense. And then Tyler Conklin, of course, Matthew, at tight end against the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, Jakobi Meyers, obviously the revenge game that everyone's been talking about. They've had it circled on the calendars all offseason as well, going back to play the Patriots. Look, he's had a 32% target share in the 3 games that he's played with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like a 32% target share. You saw it on Monday night as well. Again, he's always looking for him. He's averaging over 21 fantasy points per game. So I like him. Jordan Addison, first opportunity without Justin Jefferson on the field. He's been moving up. He's had 4 games so far this year where he's had at least 5 targets. 15.5 fantasy points is what he's averaging in there. Obviously, Justin Jefferson not being in this game vacates 10 targets per game. Some of it's been touchdown influence, that 15.5, like he's had some big plays, but still, that's going to be an opportunity for him, especially against Chicago, who are tied for the 3rd most touchdowns allowed to opposing wide receivers. We talked about Gardner Minshew. He's starting this week. We talked about him when the Anthony Richardson injury came down, but in case you missed that show, Josh Downs is going to be a thing. As long as Gardner Minshew's under center, Josh Downs is going to be a thing. You talked about how good he is in the slot. He's had a 25% target share in the 3 games that Minshew has played. There's a connection there. I'll talk about Rashee Rice real quickly. Leads all qualified wide receivers in targets per route. He leads all the Chiefs in red zone targets. Denver allows the highest catch rate to wide receivers. Rashee Rice is coming. It's a matter of like when he gets more routes, but when he's out there, he's earning a target at a very high rate on them. And finally, Tyler Conklin, your guy.
My guy.
You know,
Yep. Fire him up.
I know you
Fire
love
him
some
up.
Tyler. Look,
So does Zach Wilson lately.
4 straight games with at least 5 targets, right? And we death taxes, start your tight ends against the Eagles. He's a top 12 play for me this week.
Yep. Connor, how good do you think Jordan Addison can be while Jefferson is out? Like, is he a guy who can be a bona fide wide receiver 1? Think about someone like, who'd rather have while Jefferson is out? Jordan Addison or like Devontae Smith?
Ooh, that's a good one. I think I would still take Addison, which
Wow.
sounds crazy. It sounds crazy, but
It does.
it's just weird with the Eagles' offense. The amount of goose egg type games Devontae can have when A.J. Brown goes up. And sure, swings the other way. Sometimes Brown doesn't have a good game, and Devontae. Addison's consistency is why I would say him there when Jefferson is out. It's not a conversation when Justin Jefferson is healthy, but you will see incredible fantasy consistency from Jordan Addison these next couple weeks.
Yep. They just got too many guys in Philadelphia, and they're too good at running the ball,
Right.
and the team's too good, so they have a lead all the time. And so there's just like the drives go by, and you forget that Devontae Smith is out there because everything at the moment is going to A.J. Brown. Dallas Goedert obviously had his big game. I think Devontae Smith is too good that eventually he will just get his.
But just the ceiling on Addison, I think, is the headline there. I think I'd rather have Smith. But like, if I said to you, like, who would you rather have? Jordan Addison or DK Metcalf the rest of the way? Like, I'm just Jordan Addison or DeAndre Hopkins.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I would take Addison. Yeah.
right. I mean, like, we love Hop, but again, that offense is
Really
somewhat
limited.
somewhat challenged. Like, he's top 20-ish range for sure. The rest of the way. And anyway, really like him this week as well. I think he's a top 30 wide receiver. I want to see it a little bit more, but he's got top 20 upside.
Yep.
Let's jump into the hate list for pass catchers, which is led by somebody that was called a decoy after being on this show earlier, Deebo Samuel.
Yeah.
He's got the Browns. You mentioned some bad weather potentially there. And the fact is, too, I mean, this is an offense that has a lot of weapons here, Jay, that you never really know when it's going to be a Deebo week if it is one.
Maybe a little galaxy brain, but maybe the weather helps Deebo a little bit because they got to throw shorter passes, maybe more yards after the catch. Probably not going to be the conditions where Brock Purdy can cook like he did against Dallas with those in-breaking routes deep in the middle of the field to Ayuk. I think it is instructive that the one game that Deebo really went off was against the Giants on Thursday night when Brandon Ayuk was out. I just worry that when this team is fully healthy, there's just not enough there, not enough opportunity for Deebo to live up to his ADP.
He's had 3 total targets the last 2 weeks. 3.
bad.
Now again, I think some of it is because he's been less than 100% healthy and they haven't needed to, and so he's been a little bit of a decoy. But 3 targets in 2 weeks is 3 targets in 2 weeks. Like, it ain't great. 37.5 over under. It's the lowest on the slate, right? We expect there's like a 65% chance of rain, possibly up to 35-mile-per-hour winds in this game as well. So offense, we expect to be challenged, especially if P.J. Walker's under center for the Browns. They may not need to do much to beat Cleveland. They may just be like, you know what, we're just going to try to just grind it out and just get out of this game with a 13-6 win kind of thing against them. Cleveland, by the way, for the struggles that they may have offensively, especially against the Niners, they're really good defensively. The fewest receptions, fewest yards, fewest fantasy points allowed to wide receivers are the Cleveland Browns. You see it there on your screen. First in the NFL in all those ranks against wide receivers, and they're tied for the fewest touchdowns allowed to opposing wide receivers. Only one wide receiver has scored double-digit fantasy points against San Francisco this year on fewer than 7 receptions. Right? I mean, so again, you're going to need volume to get there against the Browns, and whether it's because of injury, because of so many mouths to feed, because of the weather, does Deebo Samuel get that kind of volume against him? I don't think so. I'm at wide receiver 25, so he's merely a mid-tier flex for me. That's the lowest I think I've had Deebo all year. It's the lowest I've had him that I can remember.
Yep.
But, yes.
As I think
Hate list is all about expectations, and I've lowered expectations for Deebo Samuel this week.
With that Cleveland defense, the betting market treats it as the best defense in football. And I think maybe people were a little thrown off the scent because they gave up 28 to Baltimore. Baltimore kept on getting the ball at the 20-yard line because DTR, he just wasn't ready for that moment. And Cleveland just had no chance with field position. So that is still an elite defense. When you add in the weather and the conditions, I wouldn't expect that it's going to be a huge day for an otherwise awesome San Francisco offense.
We'll keep the conversation right with this game because Amari Cooper is the next player on the hate list for pass catchers, and we can't repeat it enough. Bad wind, chance of rain, lowest total on the slate, Barry, and that's why Cooper comes in as wide receiver 20, two spots after Deebo Samuel. Not to mention, P.J. Walker probably has a big effect in this if he has to play.
Yeah, exactly. Again, San Francisco also very good against the pass. They've been very good at shutting down passing offenses as well. And so you think about that game last week, the last game that the Browns played when Deshaun Watson was out, Amari Cooper, 1 catch on 6 targets. And so, look, they're putting P.J. Walker in because they feel better about him than they do Dorian Thompson-Robinson at this point of DTR's career. But still, you don't feel great about Amari Cooper in bad weather with a backup quarterback against the Niners. He's just outside. Volume may get him there, but I'm at wide receiver 27. Again, he's slightly lower than Deebo, but they're both just merely, flex plays.
Our next one here, Jay, Terry McLaurin against the Falcons comes in as wide receiver 36 for Barry this week. He's got a matchup with A.J. Terrell, and quite frankly, we've talked about it all the time. This isn't an offense that leans on Terry McLaurin.
No, and the fact that Sam Howell dropped back, over 50 times against the Bears, and McLaurin had, 4 or 5 receptions, that's a concern. I would think that often when you see things like this, like we did with A.J. Brown when he didn't get the targets in a game earlier in the season, there is an overcorrection for the star wide receiver. So I would expect that they're going to try and throw to Terry McLaurin, but it just hasn't happened. And look, he came into the season with injury concerns as well. So I'm not sure if that is playing a part in his diminished performance and just his diminished target share. But certainly the matchup against A.J. Terrell isn't ideal. Terry McLaurin, I think, is going to have a hard time living up to his ADP the way this offense is trending.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with it. Listen, if everything else was working, I wouldn't worry that much about Terrell because we've seen Terry McLaurin, he's been up against Darius Slay, and he's been fine. He's cooked him. He hasn't been able to be, quote, fully shut down. Honestly, what shuts him down more than opposing cornerbacks is the offense.
Right.
The bad quarterbacks he's had to play, the bad offensive line, suspect play calling at times. But it is not a great matchup. You mentioned A.J. Terrell, who is one of the better corners in the NFL. He is, I think, one of the elite shutdown corners in the NFL. Falcons allow the 5th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. You think about that 10% target share last week. He's actually while that was a season low, he's only had one game this year with more than 6 targets. And Sam Howell's been throwing a decent amount. So it's weird, but just Bieniemy, again, taking that Kansas City offense, which has just spread the ball around. And it's weird given the talent disparity between McLaurin and a lot of the other guys on Washington, but that's just sort of what they're doing, whether it's a Howell thing or Bieniemy thing or he's not 100% healthy. But he's had under 55 receiving yards in 4 out of 5 games this year, Terry McLaurin. So again, for all of you guys that call me Travis Homer over here because I do love my Commanders and future Hall of Famer Sam Howell, I don't think this is a Terry McLaurin week. I hope I'm wrong. I would love to be wrong. I don't think I'm going to be. I have him outside my top 30 this week. It's I think you like the Falcons to cover the 2.5.
I think so. Imagine the Commanders win. They'll be 3-3.
Yeah.
Feels like they're 0-5.
But I don't. But if you look at their upcoming schedule, if you look at the Commanders' upcoming schedule, like it's so brutal, dude. They're not going anywhere this year.
Yep.
I kind of hope they lose. At this point, I want them to lose.
Yep. Me too.
8-9 is incoming.
But because I'm a diehard fan of the company, do you guys feel that way? That like I've said that before on air, and people are like, you can't be a real fan if you're wanting them to lose.
That's not true at all.
No.
I lived this with the Jets.
Exactly.
I was heartbroken when they didn't get the Trevor Lawrence pick.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like it was like the worst thing that could have happened.
1,000%.
What did Sam Darnold beat the Rams and Jared Goff? Was that the game?
They beat the Rams and they won another. It's just
The Washington had a meaningless. The year before they drafted Chase Young, Washington had a meaningless game against Miami, which was brutal that year. And Miami went down and got down by 1, and then they tried a 2-point conversion, and Washington defended and stopped it, and they ended up winning that game. If Miami scores that 2-point conversion, stupid Miami. If Miami scores that 2-point conversion, if Washington had just let them, Washington would have lost that game. That had the number 1 pick in the draft that year, and that have had Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
But no. Good thing we defended that 2-point pass. Anyway, so yeah, you know what? I'm a realistic fan, and so I would like us to get a very high draft pick. We have talent at various places.
Sometimes it goes the other way with those players, though, because Texans fans were feeling the same way, and now they got C.J. Stroud, who'd probably go number 1 over Bryce Young.
That's
true.
True.
All right, let's move over to the quarterbacks here, and we start with Justin Fields against the Vikings. Jay, it's been a good 2-week stretch here for Justin Fields, notably through the air, where he's thrown for 8 touchdowns in this 2-week stretch. Vikings defense, not much working for them as well.
No, and this will be an interesting game because the Vikings, they are blitzing at an absurd rate. So let's see what Fields can do through the air against the blitzing defense. I mean, Connor, have you seen progression from him as a passer the past couple of weeks, or is it just because of these defenses he's playing?
I've seen progression from the offense. They're actually scheming him up throws, and he's making them, and that's the most important thing. It looked like a very limited offense the first couple of weeks, and Fields was a little late on a couple of things. At least he's making the scheme throws now.
And you know what, Steven D'Agostino, our producer, screw you for when you, because they're showing, for people that are just listening, what they did is they showed nothing but Justin Fields highlights against my Commanders. You couldn't have picked some other games. It had to be nothing but him just lighting up Washington as well. Steven claiming it's a budget thing. I don't believe it. I think it was an active choice. I hate all of you. Look, the fact of the matter is quarterbacks facing the Vikings averaging almost 19.4 fantasy points per game. That's 8th most in the NFL. I've also liked the fact that he's starting to use his legs. We were always wondering in the beginning of the year, why isn't he running more? Well, 11 rushing attempts in the 2 of the past 3 games. He's had at least 45 rushing yards as well. He's my QB6 this week.
All right, our next one here, Barry, Joe Burrow. He's got the Seahawks, and when we sat down to do the show, I saw a note that Joe Burrow has said he feels healthy. He feels like he's going in the right direction. He looked a lot better. I mean, everything's starting to trend upwards for Joe Burrow, and when T. Higgins is out, leans on Jamar Chase more than ever.
There's no question about it. Everything's trending up for Joe Burrow. You know, the health, T. Higgins returning to practice. His portfolio looks great thanks to his investment in FantasyLife.com, of course. But look, here's the thing about Joe Burrow. The volume's been there. 40 or more pass attempts in 3 of the past 4 games. Seattle, it's a great matchup here against the Seahawks, too. They allow the 3rd most passing yards per game this season. 3 of the 4 quarterbacks to face the Seahawks this year have thrown for 320 yards or more. And so Burrow, who's throwing a ton, feels fully healthy, gets T. Higgins back, obviously has number 1, Jamar Chase. He's my QB7 this week, should have a huge game on Sunday.
Also, don't know if you guys saw this, but DK Metcalf said that Jamar Chase is great, but I think Devin Witherspoon will get the better of him, which is not, I don't think you say that.
Why are you poking
Didn't
the
anyone
bear?
see what happened to Bryce Harper last night in Orlando RC?
well,
You do not
yeah.
poke the bear, and Jamar Chase, particularly coming off a 192-yard game, I feel like Burrow will target him.
Yeah, he's always open.
Yeah.
I love Witherspoon as much as anyone. That's putting him in a tough spot as a rookie.
That puts him in a tough spot. Yeah, why don't talk trash for somebody else?
Yes,
Exactly. You know, like
DK doesn't have to worry about covering Jamar Chase.
no, exactly.
Oh, man.
This happens too often in the NFL. Last one of my love list guys, by the way, is Trevor Lawrence. We sort of hinted about it when we talked about Calvin Ridley, but back-to-back games with 30 rushing yards or more, which is nice. He's starting to use his legs. He's had 3 games against Indianapolis dating back to last year. He's averaging 20.4 fantasy points per game there. Colts are a bottom 10 defense in terms of most fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. Give me T-Law as a top 10 QB this week.
Jay, a couple others receiving votes. Matthew Stafford comes in as a top 10 quarterback this week for Matthew. Russell Wilson right on the outside looking in as QB 11. And Kirk Cousins QB 12 because of that Bears secondary. Who do you like here?
Yeah, I like Kirk Cousins here. I think there's probably going to be an overcorrection against Cousins because Jefferson is out. He's still got a solid offensive line. He's still got TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne. They can step into bigger roles. And this Bears secondary, I think, is still potentially the worst in football.
By the way, we talked about Stafford when we talked about Puka Nacua in Cooper Kupp. We love that matchup against Arizona, who allow the 4th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. We just saw Joe Burrow get healthy against them. And also, how about Russell Wilson tonight against the Chiefs? Like, 2 games against Kansas City last year when everything went wrong for the Broncos, and he still averaged 24.6 fantasy points per game. He's had multiple touchdown passes in 4 or 5 games this year. So, yeah, I think Russ is a top 12 quarterback play as well.
Listen, I know the hate list is led by Deshaun Watson. We don't know if he's
Bold
going
move.
Yeah,
Speaking of guys not going to play. Well done.
There you go.
Unbelievable.
Am I wrong?
You really schemed the system on that one.
Listen.
Do you hate Justin Jefferson this week?
Yeah, I do.
Devon
Actually,
Achane?
Yeah,
Rough game?
you shouldn't start any of them.
Yeah.
Like, you
yeah.
can
Achane went too much against the Panthers.
just because it's obvious doesn't mean it's wrong, Jay Croucher.
Deshaun
It's right.
Watson.
Right. You go ahead. You start Deshaun Watson on your fantasy team. See how it works out for you.
Unbelievable.
And you're gonna you know what? Barry was
Low-hanging-
right.
the low-hanging
Barry was
fruit.
right. I also am not crazy about Geno Smith.
He is playing, though.
He is playing under 16 fantasy points, I should say, in 3 of 4 games so far this year. He's actually only had 1 game with multiple touchdown passes. Cincinnati, a top 10 pass defense so far. They allow the 5th lowest completion rate to opposing quarterbacks as well. There's 1 quarterback that has scored more than 13 fantasy points against the Bengals this year, and there are only 2. And they were both guys that had 45 or more rushing yards, Lamar Jackson and Deshaun Watson. So unless you think Geno can get to 45 or more rushing yards, which maybe he can, I'm out. He's my QB 15 this week. I'm not crazy about him in this game.
Sneakily, they didn't do anything against the Giants as well on offense. That was a defensive win for the Seahawks.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of the Giants, real quickly, Daniel Jones not practicing again today. So
Tyrod time.
tomorrow will be important, but it
Revenge
could be,
game.
It could be
Tyrod.
Tyrod Taylor revenge game on Sunday Night Football only on NBC and Peacock. Tyrod Taylor against his former team, the Buffalo Bills.
in.
You can feel the hate between the two. Tune in for the passion on Sunday Night Football exclusively on NBC and Peacock.
We're going to break. When we're back, last call, looking at our best bets for Thursday Night Football right after this. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the app and use promo code BARRY when you sign up. DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. All right, it's time for last call. Let's look at the Thursday Night Football most bet player props courtesy of our friends at DraftKings. Russell Wilson passing yards. The over at 218.5 is the most popular pick on the board. Patrick Mahomes' alternate pass line of 225 plus. Cortland Sutton receptions over 3.5 after he got pretty much blanked by the Jets secondary last week. Mahomes passing touchdowns over 2.5.
He's going to see Ladarius Sneed a lot tonight, too.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I like that bet.
Pacheco over receiving yards, which is at 12.5. Jay, anything on this board, or are you veering a different direction?
Veering a different direction, Con. I'm going with Rashee Rice over 29.5 receiving yards. This is just way too low for me. He's gone over 3 straight games. In that time, he's averaged 41 yards per game. He's had 7, 5 targets the past 3 games. And just as a general rule, I think that the best wide receiver on the field for Patrick Mahomes should not be set under 30 receiving yards. I think that is Rice. I think that he will continue. He's going to break out in a big way at some point. He doesn't even need to go over 29.5. So that's my bet.
I like that bet a lot. I like Russell Wilson. Look, I sort of hinted at this during when we talked about the love and the quarterback section, but Russell Wilson over 1.5 passing touchdowns is at plus money right now. He's had 2 or more touchdown passes in 4 or 5 games this season. He had 4 touchdown passes in the 2 games against the Chiefs last year. They're double-digit underdogs in this game. He should have to throw. I get it. I mean, the Kansas City defense is good, but like game script should work. I know there's concern about the win tonight, but I think Russ is going to have to throw. Give me the over on 1.5 passing touchdowns for Russell Wilson. I'll also do this. Speaking about Isiah Pacheco, I like doing an alt line. 100-plus rushing yards for Isiah Pacheco is at plus 220. Okay, look, if you're going to bet Pacheco, right, I mean, 3 different running backs have run for over 100 yards against the Broncos so far. Again, like if you buy into the weather narrative here and the fact that they're up big, they should, use Pacheco quite a bit. They're the worst defense in the NFL against the run. They're 32nd against the run so far. No team that gives up more rushing yards per game than the Denver Broncos. The only concern here, if there's one concern, it is that it's a short week and Pacheco got used a lot. And so typically on Thursdays, running backs get less workload because of the short week. But I don't know, man. All he needs to do is break a big one here. The Broncos are so bad and Pacheco's young. If you're going to bet Pacheco, I'd rather bet the alt line at 100 at plus 220 than the 75 or whatever it is as the normal line.
Yep. Yeah, if you've done alt rushing yards against the Broncos every week this season, you'd be a rich man right now. So it's a sound strategy. All right, I'm going with a player in Jerick McKinnon who has not been fantasy relevant this season, but I'm taking his receiving yards over 13.5 because he's done this in 3 of 5 games. McKinnon has not had a big fantasy year. I've said this before. The Chiefs like to keep him kind of, in check for the second half of the season, and he could do this in 1 catch, as he has 3 times basically out of 5 games this year.
I like that call.
Yep,
I like that call.
And also, to Matthew's earlier point, additional running backs get mixed in on a Thursday, which is the key there.
Curious of what you think about this. I'm not sure I'm ready to go there, but a good friend of mine likes the Broncos to cover the 10.5 tonight. I like a backdoor cover.
I don't mind it. I think the offense is good enough potentially to do that. So yeah, at 10.5, I'd be taking the Broncos and not feeling good about it.
Fair enough. Well, listen, it's closing time, which means you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Untuck your shirt wherever you are for Jay and Connor. I'm Matthew Berry. Good luck tonight on Thursday Night Football. We'll see you tomorrow. Go read, love, hate. Peace out. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com. And I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched. Or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Rotoworld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.